Welcome to Around the Empire, the show that takes you around the U.S. Empire. I'm your host, Dan Wright.
And I'm your host, Joanne Leon.
And on this episode, May the 5th, 2018, it is a bonus episode, so the first part will be free and open to all, and the remainder will be Patreon only. On today's episode, we discuss the FBI. Is the FBI in crisis? A major story out of Time magazine. I'm guessing by the length of it, it's the cover story by Eric Lichtblau. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. It's titled, "The FBI is in crisis. It's worse than you think," unquote. And so today we're going to talk about whether any of that's true, whether it's good. I guess just start things off, I would say the FBI is in somewhat of a crisis. I'm not sure if it's in an existential crisis, but things are certainly not going well. As the article points out, there's been a lot of bad headlines. There's been a politicization of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, which was always political, going back to the J. Edgar Hoover days. But now it is at a point where it is perhaps facing some legitimacy and authority issues. The article actually takes it a step further than I've seen anybody else take it, which is to say that the FBI has, or at least tries to draw a connection to the FBI's loss of seeming objectivity to its inability of its agents to testify effectively in court. That was actually a place I had not gone when thinking about the FBI's problems, but apparently, according to Time magazine, there is some issue with juries not believing the sworn testimony of FBI agents. I don't know if that's new, but there are a few cases listed, and also it's just some screw-ups. I did not actually see the Garland, Texas one in here, but it may be in here. But that one has to be one of the biggest screw-ups recently, when apparently an FBI informant drove the terrorists to the quote-unquote Draw Muhammad cartoon contest that led to an attempted terrorist incident that ultimately led to a shooting. But there's Clavin Bundy, which was a bungled case. There's a bunch of bungled cases listed here. And then, of course, the big problem right now, which is people being scrutinized. In some cases, there's been resignations. Lisa Page, the FBI lawyer recently, who was in those text messages when Peter, I think it was Strzok and Page. I guess Strzok was having an extramarital affair? Was that the context of this? In any case,
yeah,
they had their text messages bashing Trump, talking about some meeting, quote unquote, with the now, I guess, in trouble, Mr. McCabe. And I think the article's sort of a preliminary, but it's published now in anticipation of a upcoming Inspector General report, which may do some serious damage. So even if you think the FBI is not necessarily in crisis now, it may be. I mean, I'm open to the idea that it could become a crisis situation, depending on how bad this Inspector General report from Michael Horowitz, I believe his name is set to come out. Parts of it have already come out that I guess accuse the deputy McCabe of lying to investigators about whether he leaked something to the media. So I don't know, Joanne, is the FBI in crisis?
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think there's any doubt about that. Plus, they're not used to being criticized. That's clear. But let's go back just a little bit first and talk about Eric Lichtblau, just for a little bit of context on the journalist who wrote this. He worked for the New York Times for years, and then he went to CNN. He was an editor of CNN, and he was involved in the scandal where I believe there were three people fired from CNN or forced to resign because of a story in that they claimed that Scaramucci had ties to a Russian bank, and that story was shot down.
Retracted.
Yeah, it was retracted. And there have been a number of stories retracted during the whole Trump Russiagate thing. But this one blew up bigger than the other ones for some reason. And there was a pretty rapid firing of these guys. So that was interesting. But Lichtblau himself, and a lot of people stood up for Lichtblau at the time. He had a good reputation. So now he's apparently with Time magazine, or at least they're publishing him. But I thought it was interesting when I was looking for clips and interesting things for this episode. I found one. CNN, they were anticipating Comey's, let's see, it was in June. It was like almost a year ago. It was June 2017. And they were just talking about Comey. Comey was going to come into the limelight because he'd been fired and he was going to be talking to Congress. So it was that point in time, everyone remembers, Comey was in the news like every minute of the day. But I thought it was interesting in what Lichtblau said about Comey. And it lends, even though he got in trouble, he took a hit to his credibility. He said he had been reporting about Comey and known, Comey, and been reporting on him for 14 years. So, and he was on that beat. So he knows the material that he was writing about for this particular article about the FBI in crisis. And he has context, right? Because he's known the organization. He's been reporting on them for more than a decade. So here's just a little snippet of what he said about Comey, which I found interesting.
I've covered Jim Comey 14, 15 years at this point. I think he does have a flair for the dramatic. He does not shy away from the spotlight in the way that other people in his position have, and he's quite comfortable there. His critics would say he's too comfortable there, and Trump has been among them.
So he's basically saying that Comey likes the spotlight, and he likes the drama, and he likes to put himself forward, which kind of, I was surprised to hear that, because up until now, I always thought of Comey as I guess I bought the image that they sold of him. It's just, high integrity, nonpartisan, and, certainly not that he was big on drama and the spotlight. But that's what Lichtblau says about him. So I don't know. I just thought that was interesting in context for this article. And Lichtblau starts out talking about like how things are physically in the offices at the FBI. And, he says that the way it used to be, there were TVs on in all the field offices, and the agents would be keeping up with what was going on in the cable news and breaking news and this and that. But now they don't even turn their TVs on, or they don't even watch them, because he quotes this guy named Tom O'Connor, a veteran investigator in Washington, who leads the FBI Agents Association, which I assume is like their union or their representative defenders or whatever. And this guy said, I don't care what channel's on. All you hear is negative stuff about the FBI. It gets depressing. And they're all feeling pretty down. And people always put a lot of focus, for federal employees in particular, on the morale of employees. Whenever you talk to leaders, whenever you hear leaders of particularly the intelligence agencies, they're always very concerned about the morale of the employees. And they emphasize their honor and their service to the country and all this stuff. And they want them to always feel like they're doing, great service to the country and all that, which kind of, like, I get that with the troops, but it kind of confuses me with the intelligence agencies and the FBI, because, particularly in this economic environment, I mean, that's a federal job.
Yeah, they're not heroes.
I think the pay. No, I mean, I'm not saying that they're not heroes. Like,
I'm saying that they're not.
I'm just saying that it's a very secure job. They get, good benefits. They get a pension. Maybe the salary's not what they could make in the private sector. And I know that's one of the concerns, particularly with intelligence and certain skills. Like 70% of the intelligence.
Wait a minute. If they went to the private sector, they'd simply be a contractor getting paid by the government. So it's not like the private sector for this intelligence work, this sort of sprawling national security military industrial complex now. Like, I mean, Snowden, for example, was in theory, a private sector, but his contract is really with the NSA, right?
Yeah,
so I don't buy like I'm sacrificing. Not to, I could go and make more money in the private sector. Yeah, you could make somewhat more money in the private sector. You wouldn't have a pension though. So it's like the same trade-off for everybody.
Yeah, but if you know anybody who works in that sector, it's a constant temptation. They see their coworkers, leave the office one day, come back the next day, sit in the same seat and make twice or three times the salary or, the money.
Well, wait a minute. Comey left and joined the most one of the biggest hedge funds in the world and made a ton of money and then came back. So that they do that all the time too. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's. He went to go work for Bridgewater, right?
Yeah, I know it was a hedge fund in Connecticut.
I think it was which is the biggest. I think technically the biggest hedge fund in the world. I mean, Bridgewater Associates. Yeah, it's right here. He became general counsel at Bridgewater Associates. It's an American investment fund. It's got billions of dollars, $160 billion under management. Which is to say he's making serious money at Bridgewater's as their general counsel. So, and that's the other thing about this. Like, I sacrificed. You leveraged your public sector job for a private sector job, which you then leveraged for another public sector job. It's like, it's the revolving door. So, I just don't buy that argument, especially when you look at Comey's actual resume and a lot of these other guys' resumes. They go in the private sector and make a ton of money and then come back. And then the next time when Comey cashes out, he's cashing out into a huge book deal right now, which is going to make him millions. But he was probably going to cash out when he was done his FBI term and either go to some place like Bridgewater. He's also on the board of directors of HSBC.
Yeah, for
people who were caught money laundering for the Mexican mafia, by the way.
Yeah, but they're not talking. Yeah, when you really start looking into Comey, he's not a Boy Scout. One of the funny things, this is just an aside, but you talk about Comey going to work for a hedge fund, after he left the Bush administration and before he became FBI director under Obama. He lived in Connecticut, and there are these news articles and pictures of his home, the home that he bought, like a $3.5 million house.
What a selfless public servant.
No, wait, that's not even the best part. The best part is it was near Martha Stewart. He lived near Martha Stewart. Everybody knows, right, that Comey's the one that took Martha Stewart down, right?
It's all in the neighborhood.
For insider trading. And now you see all this other, it's just, all of this is mind-blowing. I'm going to play a clip for you in a little bit. I'm going to play a clip for you from Anderson Cooper, one of his infamous panels that I found on YouTube, just to highlight the surreal nature of how all this has been going. And I agree with Eric Lichtblau that there's crisis, but it's not only the things that he's laying out where, the agents themselves are upset because they're getting insulted by the president. They're losing confidence and they're,
oh no,
I'm sure that
being insulted.
They can't be happy. Yeah. Well, let me just to finish my previous thought. The intelligence and law enforcement agencies always talk about, we have to maintain the morale of our employees. But I think that's almost code for we need to maintain our own reputations and we have to maintain the reputations of our agencies because we can't have our budgets cut. That's always one of the top things in there.
Right, because it's about influence. The budget says how important you are, and so a big budget means you're very important, so they want to be very important, so they care about their budget. Even money. Here's the funny thing is, they want to increase budget even if they have nothing to spend it on. Sometimes the money just sits there.
Yeah.
I mean, they just want to have a big budget. It's a chit. It's a status. It's a social status to be a large funded agency.
Yeah, the
And
more bigger your budget, the more important you are,
and that goes to another part of this article, which says one of the reasons this FBI got off track was because Robert Mueller, who's now the special prosecutor, decided he wanted to go into the counterterrorism business and basically left out a lot of the more traditional FBI investigative functions. And why would you want to do that? Well, partly maybe it was an interest in public service, but partly maybe it was because this is the biggest game in town after 9/11. And we want to be relevant and we want to be important, even if we don't have a lot to contribute, even if, the article also notes that, Russian intelligence told the FBI that the Tsarnaev brothers were gone to Chechnya and hooked up with the Tsarnaev brothers, the people who were part of the Boston Marathon bombing. And the FBI kind of shrugged. Okay. Didn't do anything. I mean, that's a big tip.
Well, not only that, they also shot a guy during an interview in Florida, remember?
Yeah, I remember that. They killed him. They said they had no choice but to kill him during the interview, which...
Well, they couldn't get their story straight.
Yeah, they couldn't get the story straight about it, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, that was fishy.
Yeah, there's a lot of fishiness. Garland, there's all sorts of fishiness. The Bundy stuff. They shot somebody else during that Bundy standoff that they... The
Florida shooting, the school shooting.
Where they were warned continually.
They have this hotline, if you see something, say something. And people did, and they didn't do shit.
Yeah, I mean...
If you want to talk about why the public has lost trust, I mean, that alone they had to have taken a big hit.
You never hear about our successes. I love that defense. They always use that defense. The CIA is the king of that defense. Because it's harder for the FBI to say, because it's like, no, we should hear about your successes because you're supposed to lead to prosecutions. So actually, we should know about your successes. The CIA can say, well, we never tell about our successes. We never talk about what we stopped. But the FBI, it's like we're supposed to actually know because you're supposed to be doing this as part of a criminal investigation process. So eventually people are supposed to go to court and either plea or get convicted. So actually we're supposed to know.
Well, to be fair, though, Dan, one thing I always complain about with our intelligence is that, they like to be cowboys and they like to play offense because that's where the fun is and that's where the glory is. And particularly in cybersecurity, I mean, from being in IT for so many years, there's always certain people who are in charge of security and things like that. And it's a whole different personality. A person who's playing defense, just like in a sports team, there's not as much glory. It's a super important job. It can be boring. It's, day after day after day doing certain things to make sure that you're keeping whatever it is that you're in charge of safe. So they do have a point when they say you don't hear about all the good things that we did, because that's just part of the job of being, if you really are defense or, related to that.
Doesn't work for them.
But the thing is that the FBI has, when Mueller shifted their mission for terrorism to be their top mission, they really became, even though they're not technically part of the Department of Defense, they became very closely tied with the Department of Defense, even though they're Department of Justice.
Well, they also put people in the embassies around the world. They have undercover agents in all the U.S. embassies, not all of them, but a lot of them after 9/11. And so you have like the military attaché, who's from the Pentagon. You have the station chief, who's from the CIA, and then you have this FBI guy in there. So you got like three different parts of the U.S. government. I mean, in theory, they could all be complementing each other's work, but what we all know is that the FBI and the CIA are involved in an eternal pissing match, which is what contributed partly to 9/11, if you believe the 9/11 report, right? They weren't sharing intelligence with each other. So now you got them all in the embassies. I think it is just a big power grab. I think it had nothing to do with I think that's Homeland, TV drama. When you look at what they do is the FBI is typically setting people up in many cases, they're selling weapons to people who are like incompetent. Some of them are foolish. They would never been able to get I mean, a lot of their stuff is provocation. They send in like agent provocateurs.
There's sting operations.
It's more. No, it's not even a sting. It's like nobody even had this idea in the beginning, and someone goes in and tries to foment an action, and then they say, "Oh, we got you." It's like, well, wait a minute. Were these people even going to do this? And they get caught doing this all the time, where they sell the guns to the guys who, in some cases, they're not even really that interested in it. In some cases, like there was this guy who was blowing up a bridge in Cleveland, and it wasn't even his idea. It was the FBI informant's idea the entire time. With famous case in the RNC convention with Brandon Darby. I think we're defensive. You don't hear about it. I think that is mostly, I guess 90% bullshit.
Yeah. You're talking about the counterterrorism operations, I guess. I mean, and often there's someone who's kind of feeble or,
right, suggestible. It's usually the FBI informant's idea, which is kind of like you can say, okay, well, everybody uses agent provocateurs, but it also sounds to me a lot like entrapment, especially if it was not their idea. And in many, you got the FBI agent or informant or part of this FBI operation driving the shooters in the Draw Muhammad contest to the site.
Yeah.
No intervention. He just lets them get out of the car. They go to shoot this place up. Now
they would have absolutely no means to carry something like this out on their own. Then the FBI, it's just for glory and justification of their giant counterterrorism budget. Because you have to remember that these budgets, they've had these giant budgets now for 16, 17 years. You have to remember that these budgets are still something like doubled what they were before 9/11. So, I guess they see it as a job to, maybe they're all thinking still like that we're going to return to the pre 9/11 days if they don't, keep everything jacked up.
Well, that's what cyber war is about. That's how it's like the new rationalization for these massive budgets, because we've done this war on terror now for 15 years, and it's kind of a joke in terms of this kind of spending. Unless you're going to actually invade countries, which we now know is a lot of people knew this before Iraq, but now we definitely know it's a disaster. So how do you justify these huge budgets now? It's like, we're going to migrate over to cyber. That's the new golden goose. We're going to rope everything into the quote global cyber war, and that'll justify us maintaining this budget.
For sure, yeah. Well, I think they've already made that conquest. That gold rush is, I don't know if it's over, but they certainly, beefed up those budgets.
No, they started it. I mean, with Stuxnet or the Olympic Games, they initiated, they provoked a global cyber weapons race, or at least kicked one that was already going on into overdrive, because suddenly you had this developed between the U.S. and Israeli intelligence, this very sophisticated virus taking down the Natanz facility in Iran. So they all, they're starting it and then saying, we're in the middle of a cyber war.
Yeah, but I mean, they've already gotten those, they've already beefed up those budgets, and it's not just for the internal agencies, right? I think it's mainly for all the contract work. That's where the contractors start getting. You have to remember, always keep it in mind, this massive machine, the military, industrial, intelligence complex, whatever you want to call it.
Congressional complex.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's making it.
Alan Hamilton, that was Snowden's employer. That's a major federal contractor.
Not to get off track, but there's a new one brewing now. It's always good to keep your eye on NATO for the trends. Like NATO was like, I think we need to have NATO cybersecurity. Yes, we need NATO cybersecurity.
How else can we justify this budget? How can we spend more money?
Yeah, so NATO's becoming a bigger and bigger thing on its own instead of just an alliance, right? Now they do their own cybersecurity stuff. And the next big thing in addition to like big tanks and things, because we're going to go for big enemies now. We're back to big enemies rather than insurgencies. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea. Anyway, so they're going to start building more big tanks and ships and all that stuff. And it makes everybody, happy. All the warmongers. But now NATO's saying that NATO needs to have an information war department too. So they're beefing up the information operations budgets now. They're working on that.
They're victims. They're total victims. They were caught flat-footed. I mean, you have to really believe the narrative here, which is that NATO is like, it just stumbled and expanded across Eastern Europe. And now, suddenly under threat. I mean, it's just such a load of crap, but it's so mindlessly repeated, and most people don't have time to look into it, so they think it's actually true. But in fact, NATO and the U.S. are extremely aggressive. They are the aggressors, particularly in the cyberspace. And now it's suddenly they're the victims, which is some sort of like, we're victims, so therefore we deserve. It's like it's a strange rationalization for power for an empire to claim you're constantly the victim. But it apparently is doing the trick so far.
It seems to work, yeah.
And the FBI is in on that, to draw it back, to get back to our topic at hand. So the FBI is in on the counterterrorism and counterintelligence game. But I wonder if they bit off a little bit more than they could chew on this one, because I think the part that would bother me if I was looking at the future of the FBI is, this endless campaign against the FBI that they're taking such umbrage at is rather effective. And now you see the right wing people essentially starting to really question the FBI and then you see people on not the real left or the substantive left, but some center left people, center left, are saying
the
neoliberals, really, the partisan hacks who, let's be clear, the partisan hacks who absolutely detested the FBI when the Comey letter came out.
Oh yeah, it was a complete and total freak out.
They have 180 the other way now because they hate Trump. Now, let's be clear, 10 years from now, if Trump is on the sidelines and criticizes the current Republican president, whoever that is, if there's a Republican president, these people will trumpet him just like they're trumpeting George W. Bush lackeys. I mean, these people have no core convictions. They're just partisan hacks. So, suddenly David Frum and Bill Kristol are the voices of reason. Max Boot. So they'll be praising Trump in 10 years if he says something bad about a Republican president. They have so the FBI has become their heroes of the resistance, but that'll change the minute the FBI does something against the Democratic Party. Whereas I think the damage being done on the right is probably pretty substantial.
And the epitome of that is, I have a couple clips for you. One of them is this Anderson Cooper panel the other night, where here's how you know that there's been a tear in the political space-time continuum and whatever, because Rudy Giuliani is attacking the FBI. Rudy Giuliani, remember him? A noun, a verb, and 9/11.
Joe Biden sucks, 9/11.
And
that was one of the better SNL jokes.
And you have Van Jones defending the FBI. Of course, then he flips on it because I think Van Jones is kind of, I don't know, his mind has become very tangled, because I'm not saying he's not like a mental thing. I'm just saying that like how he really feels. I think he's torn between what's left of him that's genuine and the Van Jones that has to go on the camera in front of CNN. It's sort of like how he goes on CNN and he talks about Russiagate, and then he talks to one of O'Keefe's undercover people on the street and says that Russiagate's a nothing burger, even though he's on the air talking about Russiagate. Oh my God, Russia. That's Van Jones right now. It just like he's torn. Let's just put it that way. But you have to hear this panel, the freak out that happens because Giuliani called the FBI stormtroopers. They did a whole segment on this, right? And then you have Mark Penn. And Dan and I have been talking about what the heck is going on with Mark Penn. It's just the people who, I guess what I'm trying to say is that I personally thought that particularly, people who are of independents and left-leaning independents and the left are very aware of the things that the FBI does that aren't in our best interest. But the news media didn't really talk about it much because they glorify all authorities. Yeah. So anyway, I think that this Anderson Cooper panel, first of all, Giuliani going after the FBI and the way this panel reacts just kind of, I don't know, it just epitomizes this part of this crisis or chaos or whatever you want to call it with the FBI. First, let me tell you who's talking here because there are a lot of voices. The people who are on this panel. So it's Anderson Cooper. Obviously, he's the first one to speak. The second one who speaks is Van Jones. The third one is Scott Jennings, who's a former assistant to George W. Bush. The fourth is Maria Cardona, a Democratic strategist. And then we have Shelby Holliday, a female Wall Street Journal reporter. And then we have Jeffrey Toobin, is a legal analyst. I think people recognize his voice. And then David Urban, who I was.
How many people are on this panel?
7.
What the hell?
And it's David Urban, former Trump campaign strategist. So it's a deliberate mix of Democrat, partisans on both sides, but you might not actually be able to tell who's a Democrat and who's a Republican because of this crazy mixed up situation that they've, created. So I don't know. Maybe I should stop and tell you who's talking. I'm not sure. I'll just play it through.
Just let it roll.
Giuliani has said in the last 24 hours or so, some have caused heartburn, some have raised legal questions, which we've been discussing. One item about the searches of Michael Cohen's home, office, and hotel room have raised eyebrows. Searches, we should mention, with warrants which a judge signed off on and which Cohen himself called, quote, professional, courteous, and respectful. That is not how Mayor Giuliani described it.
The only possible violation there would be, was it a campaign finance violation, which usually would result in a fine, by the way, not this big stormtroopers coming in and breaking down his apartment and breaking down his office.
Back now with the panel. I mean, when did Republicans start to call American law enforcement stormtroopers? I mean, had this been said by a Democrat in the Obama administration, understandably, people would have been hugely offended.
And this actually does point to a deeper set of problems, which is systematically you're having a huge section of the American people cleaved off. And, we don't talk about America's government anymore, which we're all supposed to respect. We talk about the deep state. It's the same thing. It's a public servants, civil servants, elected officials trying to make America work. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, they're human. But the idea that you now have tens of millions of people who are buying into this rhetoric. This rhetoric did not raise eyebrows on the station that it was aired on because it's a constant refrain that America's government is now somehow the enemy of the American people. And that kind of treasonous language being normalized is as dangerous as anything else we're seeing.
Okay, can I just stop for a minute? Did you hear what he just said? He called it.
This is so. You really see the guts in this. How the sausage is made here. Like they've picked a throwaway line, and now it is suddenly pinned. The second clip they played was like 2 seconds, and now they're suddenly all upset. And Van Jones is saying it's. I don't know if is he saying that it's treasonous to question law enforcement, or is he lamenting that people are calling law enforcement treasonous? I don't know what it means. What is he saying?
He's saying that what Giuliani did there by calling them stormtroopers and all that is treasonous language. Okay, so yeah. And Giuliani, I think, was clearly, using hyperbole here, don't you? I don't think
it's a clear throwaway line. Like everybody in that panel knows it.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. So I just wanted to make sure you caught that treasonous language thing, especially in light of what Dan Jones is going to say after this. But here we go.
I think there are a handful of people in the FBI who have done things they shouldn't have done. McCabe is probably example 1A, but it is not.
Comey's.
But it is not. It is not. Well, Comey. I mean, look, Comey's had a rough ride the last couple of weeks, in my opinion, in terms of his own image and how he's handled numerous things. But to call all the agents stormtroopers is out of bounds. Republicans respect law enforcement. We respect local law enforcement, state troopers, FBI. I mean, that's the party I've been a part of for a long time, and I don't like that kind of language, frankly. And I wish they wouldn't use it. I think it's perfectly appropriate to point out when FBI people or any other government people have done wrong things, have done bad things. No one's above criticism or the law. To use that language, I don't.
Can I just say something now? I agree with you 100%. And yet, when African Americans raise the point about law enforcement, I'm from a law enforcement family, so I think I'm okay to say this. You got good ones, you got bad ones. If you say, as an African American, I got a problem with how law enforcement is, then you hate America. What's wrong with you? Respect. Donald Trump will come after you with Colin Kaepernick can't get a job right now, and yet the same people who will go after African Americans who are burying children will then turn around and say FBI agents executing a lawful warrant are Nazis. That does not make a lot of sense to ordinary people.
And in addition to that, I'm glad you're saying, Scott, that you don't agree with that. Where are the other Republicans? Where is the Republican leadership that is coming out to say that is not appropriate? Where is Mitch McConnell? Where is Paul Ryan
God,
saying
who cares?
this is dangerous for democracy? Because in order for this country to continue to be a successful American experiment, we need to have a democracy that works. We need to have law enforcement and democratic institutions that people actually have faith in. And what the President of the United States is doing is trying to denigrate and trying to peel off, to your point, peel off faith in those institutions because he believes those institutions are going after him.
So that was the Democratic strategist.
Good Lord, this is like the dumbest discussion I've ever heard. People listen to this every night. These like nitpicky nonsense. This is a 2-second clip.
Yeah, but
and now suddenly this is the fall of the Republic.
Yeah, but it turns out in this case, I don't watch these panels every night. I found this clip on YouTube, but it just illustrates the chaos right now in the norms, in everything. So we're going to continue. And now Shelby Holiday, the Wall Street Journal reporter, is going to talk.
So add that what he said was just wrong. Michael Cohen himself said the raid was fine, that everyone was respectful. And then I also thought this actually shows how Rudy Giuliani's role is more on the PR side, as we had talked about, rather than the legal side. He said last night, same thing about Paul Manafort. They broke down his doors. He said they went into Paul Manafort's place like I used to deal with the mafia. I don't know if he's been reading court filings of his client's own case, but Paul Manafort's raid was not a pre-dawn, no-knock warrant. The special counsel's made that very clear in the last few weeks. So it seems like he's not even familiar with the case, his own client's case. And he also made this statement that the president can't be subpoenaed because the president can't be distracted.
Do you think Rudy Giuliani
and I thought that was a very interesting
believes
political
this,
argument?
or is just, he's being paid to
lie,
gin things up?
Absolutely.
You mean like you are? He's being paid to gin things up like CNN?
So the Wall Street Journal reporter kind of gets it. She's talking about the literal versus, Giuliani's hyperbole. And she says he's just out there for the PR of it. And then Anderson Cooper says, well, so do you think that Giuliani really does believe that they are stormtroopers? And now Jeffrey Toobin steps in and says, absolutely, he does.
Oh, my God.
Right, here he goes.
I think he believes every word.
Do you?
I think Giuliani has. I mean, did you remember?
He used to be the law and order guy.
He used to be the law and order guy. He used to be a moderate Republican. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's changed completely. Mm-hmm. I mean, he when he was mayor of New York City. I mean, this is a diverse, pretty liberal city, and he won 2 terms. It was 2 or 3. I mean, it was 2 terms, I think. He lost his first race and then won 2 terms. He had a very successful mayor. But ever since 9/11, he's turned into a super authoritarian. I mean, his speeches during the campaign, he was, incredibly irresponsible talking about Hillary Clinton.
Mm-hmm. And even an authoritarian, I mean, odd that then he's calling the arms of the state the stormtroopers.
But it's part of our tribal politics now. Is that if you're a Republican now, and respectfully, there is a package of views that includes disrespect for the FBI, or at least the part of the FBI that's investigating Donald Trump.
No, that's not true. I think what Scott said is absolutely right. There are bad apples in law enforcement at all levels of law enforcement. And in this case, there's no way you should be characterizing FBI agents that go in there and do a job every day like that.
And how many elected Republicans?
Yeah, 2 Republicans sitting on this panel.
No, elected Republicans who have to run.
Yep.
Denounce Giuliani for calling them stormtroopers. How many?
None today. Right.
So anyway, that's
all right. That's God. These people. It's like the most pedantic. But in any case, I mean, it was interesting to say that this is our tribal politics. You have to take this suite of views, this portfolio that includes antipathy towards the FBI, and now apparently on the other side, you have to take the center left, the Democratic Party. You have to take a suite of views where the FBI and the CIA are heroes. Which let me tell you, that's a new portfolio for a lot of people.
Yeah, it definitely is, and just this shift and this mixed upness of it. I think Eric Lichtblau doesn't mention that, but it illustrates what his premise is, that the FBI is in crisis and it's worse than you think. I think it illustrates that. Plus, I just found the whole thing hilarious.
It is. It's objectively like a throwaway line. They come in there like stormtroopers. I mean, what he's clearly saying is they come in there thuggishly. That's it. That's just really the beginning. It's not a deeper. I don't think there's a lot of depth to it. I mean, I don't like Rudy Giuliani at all. I think he's a total. I don't like Giuliani at all. He's, he was authoritarian in New York. His policy towards homeless people was brutal. His racial profiling. He cut some corners when he was a U.S. attorney, if we're going to dial the clock back. And he was definitely one of the most unhinged presidential candidates. And he did crassly exploit 9/11. And he has the face of the Joker. But and so I have a lot of reasons not to like him.
Don't forget the MEK speeches too.
Oh yeah, yet another one. Yeah, that was my Howard Dean scream. But so there's a lot not to like. There's nothing I can think of to like. But it's a throwaway line, and it's not. Where's the Republicans condemning this?
Yeah, the point he's really making.
Who cares?
How dare you raid one of the big shots? How dare you go after and raid our offices, that kind of thing. Putting aside the fact that it's Trump's lawyer,
And how about the fact that if we actually talk about the history of the FBI, I mean, they engaged in political repression. In one case, Fred Hampton, they essentially organized an extrajudicial assassination. I mean, they set the guy up and killed him for his political beliefs. Not to mention the wide-ranging COINTEL program, which is a counterintelligence program against anti-war, civil rights activists. So, I mean, the FBI is, I'm not saying they have the ideals of National Socialism, because that'd be ridiculous, but the idea that these are just they've never done any kind of thuggish, oppressive conduct in our country's history. Definitely, and this is apparently something James Comey used to show to people, check out the Martin Luther King file that the FBI has and what they did to try to destroy Martin Luther King. In one case, J. Edgar Hoover may have written it himself. He wrote a letter. You can look at this online. So it's part of a congressional investigation trying to get Martin Luther King to kill himself, basically saying, I have these tapes of you engaging in extramarital, infidelity, and I'm going to expose them, and you'll be ruined, and you should kill yourself and stop this civil rights stuff. So the FBI, not stormtroopers, but not exactly the selfless, apolitical defenders of liberal democracy you might think they suddenly are if you listen to some of the recent Democratic rhetoric. It would have been different the day the Comey letter came out, but currently the FBI are selfless servants who have never done anything wrong and, above reproach.
Right. And hold up for a second. For 50 years that Hoover ran the FBI, at least for the latter part of those years, presidents, everyone in Washington feared Hoover and the FBI, right? So we're not talking about like your friendly neighborhood FBI agents. We're not. This is, I don't know. I guess it's kind of absurd to I don't know. It's kind of absurd to just to forget about all of that.
The caricature they're painting is so strange. It's really like it actually sounds like propaganda. It kind of sounds like FBI propaganda. Like it's kind of like the way they describe the FBI, the Democrats now. It's like the FBI recruiting film. You'll come work for people who just want to serve the country and have no ulterior motives. Like, it's ridiculous given the history.
And that's what Comey, maybe more than anybody else, tried to project that image. Certainly for himself. And I think for the FBI too. Like, if you read his tweets, I don't know. I find them to be a bit surreal, don't you? I think, let me just get a couple of them and read some of the recent things.
He's totally up his own ass. He's such a narcissistic personality disorder. In a way, it's kind of perfect for the age of Trump. He's like he's like the FBI Trump. It's all about him.
Yeah, that's a good point. Plus, some of his higher level people are dropping like flies. And here's Comey's. Comey's on Twitter now, right? So he makes these pronouncements. All the people who complained the most about Trump using Twitter, and they're now on Twitter themselves. So here's what he said on May 3rd. He said, "I know the New York FBI. They are no stormtroopers. There are no stormtroopers there. Just a group of people devoted to the rule of law and the truth."
Oh, okay.
Our country would be better off if our leaders tried to be like them rather than comparing them to Nazis.
We should our elected, if only the American people would elect the FBI president.
If we could all be more like the FBI, that would fix everything.
You too can be the Lone Ranger.
Actually, he's saying our country be better off if our leaders tried to be like them. Okay.
No, he's saying basically like, if things would be better if the FBI just ran things, because they're such a great model for how to behave and how to be an American. They're really the spirit of America is in the FBI. It's just like, once again, this isn't even sophisticated propaganda. It's just pablum. The fact that it's being mindlessly repeated by Democratic partisan hacks is, that's like when when the Republican in that panel said, we're all about law enforcement, we're all about law and order, and so we usually like the FBI. It's like, yeah, because you have that, leave it to beaver crap as part of your cultural war. The fact that the Democrats are now adopting, liberals are adopting it is what's weird.
I'm just looking through these Comey tweets, and lots of pictures of himself. At the end of February, he tweets, "Lordy, this time."
Lordy. Davey.
This time, there will be a tape. Audiobook almost finished.
Well, he's selling books, and really, isn't that what's important?
Apparently, yeah. I was looking for the one where he defends McCabe. That one was...
Oh, I bet he deleted that one. Because he's apparently threw McCabe under the bus, if I understand it. Talk about an FBI in crisis.
McCabe threw Comey under the bus.
No, Comey said McCabe probably broke the rules.
Oh, okay. But McCabe said, hey, Comey knew what I was doing the whole time. He was well aware of this and, tacit approval. Okay, it was way back. This is January 29th, before they threw each other under buses. He says, Special Agent Andrew McCabe stood tall over the last 8 months when small people were trying to tear down an institution we all depend on. He served with distinction for 2 decades. I wish Andy well. I also wish continued strength for the rest of the FBI. America needs you. You also have Eric Holder and John Brennan pushing out this kind of stuff. Also on.
No, wait a minute. Let's be fair. John Brennan's coming. He's coming for real.
Yeah, he's mostly going after Trump, although he also throws in some of the same kind of, men and women of the intelligence agencies.
No, but he's not like pretending like he's this Boy Scout. He's acting.
Yeah, right.
He's going. I almost give him credit for that. Like he's for real. He's like, I hate you. Like you're not saying that explicitly, but the hate is palpable.
Yeah, he's Alan Dulles reincarnated or whatever. So the other thing that Lichtblau brings up is that, well, I think that the conclusion he's drawing, at least what I got from it, was the reason why the FBI agents themselves are so upset or, depressed about all this is because Trump is lashing out at them. And that's just something that never happened. Like I said, for decades, presidents feared Hoover. They would never do something like this. They never fire him either, because he always made it clear to them what kind of dirt he had on them, that if they did try to fire him, they would regret it. But what does he say here? Many view Trump's attacks as self-serving. He has called the renowned agency an embarrassment to our country, and its investigations of his business and political dealings a witch hunt. But as much as the Bureau's roughly 14,000 special agents might like to tune out the news, internal and external reports have found lapses throughout the agency, and longtime observers, looking past the partisan haze, see a troubling picture. Something really is wrong with the FBI. So while they're bummed out because they're getting trashed on the news and by their own president, now is when he starts to get into the nitty-gritty.
Right, and this is important. Right, this is an important point, which is to say that, and Lichtblau and other people have talked about this, and this is why it's kind of relevant beyond the media noise, is that there appears to be like two simultaneous problems with the FBI. One, they have this big political problem because of the Russian investigation, Comey, whatever happened in the last days with Obama unmasking and all this other stuff, this counterintelligence thing that started in July or August of 2016. And corresponding in parallel, of course, probably being amplified, is failures that are just happening with the institution regardless, which is what Lichtblau is talking about, which is just like the war on terror hasn't been good for them. They've been having a lot of chokes, mess ups. He talks about juries not necessarily believing them as much anymore, FBI agents who testify. It seems to be, at least from my perspective or my perception, Joanne, just independent of the Trump phenomenon.
I agree. It's two root problems, the one that we see and the one that we don't see, but that's a structural problem. And basically he talks a lot about how Comey and McCabe, probably abused their power, abused this agency, to its detriment. But even before that, Mueller had profoundly changed the agency itself, from what we were sort of talking about earlier, changed their mission. I mean, he literally changed their mission to be terrorism being their primary mission. And, that fundamentally changed the agency itself and led to all of these failures at home. And
because they're not doing they're out of their core competence. And of course, the war on terror is such nonsense anyway, that, the FBI was involved in the Muslim surveillance program, the profiling. I mean, they're involved in these things that are kind of dumb. And, even if you were competent and highly professional, you're still working a stupid policy. So how well can you really perform? Like the DEA may have extremely effective agents and the best surveillance and covert operations around, but guess what? The war on drugs is still pretty dumb. So it's not like they can make the country a lot better, even if they're effectively pursuing their policy. Although what I get from this article is that the FBI is kind of blowing it on a key, at least the ones that have gotten a lot of high profile. The Parkland shooting has to be the biggest recent media black eye, where you had also the Las Vegas shooting apparently is in the mix. But the Parkland shooting, where, someone has been tipping them repeatedly about this guy, Nicholas Cruz, saying literally, this guy's talking about shooting up his school, and no action. And apparently it happened more than once, because it happened earlier because someone saw him on YouTube or something. I mean, that's just dropping the ball. So independent of Trump, the FBI has its own internal inadequacies that are coming to the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And in the meantime, We're becoming more of a police state. We're becoming more of an authoritarian government, and it's not working, right? And we can see these big, obvious failures. And it's part of a bigger pattern. Even if you think about the things that Trump says about troops in Syria, just to pick one example, he's saying that, we have to pay for these overseas adventures. I shouldn't use that word because it's really awful to even call it an adventure. These invasions and occupations that we're doing, or even just the places where we're just bombing, we're spending huge, huge amounts of money on these things. But like he says, if you want to build a school in Ohio, you can't get the money to do it. And so it's a similar.
If only he were president, he could do something about this.
Yeah, man, he's going to own that. He owns these quagmires now. He's so conflicted over it. He keeps blurting out these things in the middle of speeches where he says that, we're going to bring our troops home. We're going to bring them home pretty soon, but we want to leave a lasting footprint in Syria. And then he blurts out the thing about, but somebody else is going to pay for it because, we spend all this money in the Middle East, but we want to build a school in Ohio and we can't get the money.
It's like a reverse Dr. Strangelove. It's like he's occasionally taken over by his peace instincts. For people who haven't seen the movie, there's I guess a former Nazi German scientist who's struggling with himself. One of his hands has a glove on it, he doesn't, and every time he starts talking, it starts Sieg Heiling uncontrollably or fighting with him, and it's kind of like he's trying to keep the the Nazi part of him, at bay, suppressed, and like Trump is the opposite. Like he's talking over his worst piece. He goes, "Why don't we just come home from Syria? Why are you even there?"
And you can tell he just blurts them out, right? Because he just goes off script. I could just picture his.
It's free association. It's like Jack Kerouac or something. And when he's free associating off script, he's a peacenik. Then he comes back into his office and he orders a bunch of bombings.
Oh my God. And that Anderson, that's another reason why I picked that Anderson Cooper clip, because it's just so, I'm sure if I had a better vocabulary, there's a good word for it. It's fractured. It's surreal. It's everybody's, totally mixed up. Maybe this is just what big change is about. I don't know. Or another thing is like, if you let a little bit of truth out instead of, the media is so tightly controlled and the narrative is so tightly controlled. But as soon as you start talking about reality, I mean, everything goes off the rails. That's kind of like what it is.
Well, it's kind of like these people are like been programmed to be a certain way. And because things have changed because of the Trump phenomenon, they're like struggling to get back to basic programming. Like they're like, well, Republicans support the FBI, but FBI bad or FBI good? Program to say FBI good, but now FBI bad. Oh, program to say FBI bad, but now FBI good? Trump bad.
Treasonous language. FBI bad. Treasonous.
Trump bad. Trump no like FBI. Yeah. FBI must be good. Like it's like this. All the wires are getting crossed. So you need these kind of absurd interactions where people are struggling to find a way to square the circle. So it's gotta be exhausting. Anderson Cooper must be exhausted. So making mountains out of the smallest molehills. They came in like stormtroopers. Oh my God, this is it.
But to be fair, if you, I don't know, when you start waking up and you start getting bits of information about the way things really are, and you start reading and listening to people who talk about the way things really are, it does blow your mind, and it takes a long time to adjust, to undo some of the programming that you've been subjected to, or whatever you've been happy with for most of your life. So maybe that's an optimistic way to look at it. Maybe
it's an extremely optimistic way to look at it. No, but they're like, I think they're what the people who oppose Trump are doing, particularly people in the Democratic Party, is they're just using basically the rule of opposites. They're just saying, okay, whatever he's for, we have to be against. And we have to be extremely against it, because that's how we contrast ourselves with him. Now, this was a strategy because at the time, early on, he was like the most unpopular president. His polling is miraculously from their perspective, not from mine, I don't think. I don't think I ever thought he would stay at 30% forever or whatever it was. But he's now at like 50%, 45%.
Is he for real? Yeah.
Well, I mean, Rasmussen is a very favorable towards conservatives, but he's definitely polling in the 40s.
Okay, so he's up.
He's back. He's basically back to where other presidents are. He's within the margin of error. So the economy is just too good for him to be incredibly unpopular, to be quite blunt about it. I mean, and I don't think the economy is great, and I think inequality is a huge issue, but this is not a terrible economy right now. In fact, recent data is 4%, under 4% unemployment, depending on how you measure it. So he's not going to be immensely unpopular with an economy like this.
Let's just say relative, okay? Because it's an improved economy. It's not a good economy.
That's not good. Okay, absolutely. You're absolutely correct on that one. I take that correction. I'm living it, I can tell you.
Yeah.
But
these jobs are shit jobs.
Yeah, they're shit jobs. But it's not catastrophic. And so for people who lived through 2008 and the aftermath, maybe I'm not drowning. Maybe my head's just above water, but I'm not drowning.
Yeah.
So I think Trump is not as unpopular as they thought. So taking the complete polar opposite position, like, oh, the North Korean summit's a terrible idea because Trump's part of it. Like, well, wait a minute. Peace summit? That's usually a good idea. Maybe you should just they don't pick their battles anymore. They just take the opposite position because it's a polarized rhetoric. Now, in also fairness, these people are pundits. I don't think they believe it, though. I think like the people on CNN who are defending the FBI right now would turn on it in a dime if tomorrow you don't even have to, it's not even a theoretical thing. Just look if we could find the clips and the writing about what happened after James Comey sent that letter out. And by the way, during this whole thing, besides Comey's book tour, Hillary Clinton is on a book tour. And she is explicitly blaming Comey for her loss, as well as deplorables and men who hate women and da-da-da-da. And she's probably doing some pretty serious damage to the Democratic Party's brand. But in any case, she's on her own, and she still has because give her credit, actually, which I'd never say about Hillary Clinton, but let's do it. She's being consistent. She's like, I think this guy helped cost me the election.
Yeah.
And I think it was totally inappropriate. And she's right. I don't know if he cost her the election because I think she was incredibly unpopular, but he absolutely hurt her, and it was absolutely inappropriate. Yeah. And now Democrats are, they all held that view up until it looked like he was going to hurt Trump. And now suddenly James Comey, they're happy to play into James Comey's own narcissistic self-portrait if they think it advances the ball in hurting Trump.
Right. That's
not principle.
I personally don't know what Comey should have done in the situation that he was in, because we talked about this in a previous. I think we kind of disagree on this, but Comey was in Loretta Lynch and the Clintons and the Obama administration put him in an incredibly impossible situation.
We're going to continue to disagree with this, but I think
regardless of that,
the IG report's going to give a more detailed explanation of what the procedures in the FBI are, and I think, and I take your point, it's a considered view, but I think you're going to see that he violated not just typical practice for investigators, but there's probably a bunch of rules, internal rules that the Inspector General report will note that he broke when he did that press conference. Like, I have a feeling he didn't just break a norm or claim emergency. I think he claimed emergency powers in a sense, like that he basically said all of our internal protocols are out the door. And I imagine the IG is going to be like, yeah, no. No, you're not supposed to just go do that, even if you think the Attorney General is compromised. Which, I mean, I'm not a fan of Loretta Lynch. I think she was a substandard Attorney General, although then again, Eric Holder was a terrible Attorney General, so it's all relative, I guess. But
When's the last time we had a good attorney general? I don't know. I'm trying to think.
Was Kennedy's guy, Katzenbach? Or was that Johnson's guy?
I don't even.
I think he was both. He was, civil rights. But it's been a while since we had a good attorney general. I'll agree with that. But in any case, I know your view on this, that he was in an impossible situation. But either way, the Democrats hated him when he did it. Both the press conference and the letter, they hated him, and now he's the hero. Which just goes to show you they don't really care about the facts, which is also true of the right wing, but it's also true of these center left people. So,
but if he hadn't done
crisis, but
if he hadn't done it and Trump still won, which was a pretty likely situation, then it would have come out that the investigation had been opened again, and he had not told the public about it. So, he told the public in July that the investigation was closed. I mean, I don't think he was still calling it a matter at that point because Loretta Lynch told him to, because clearly Hillary Clinton told Loretta Lynch not to call it an investigation because her campaign was denying like crazy that she even was under criminal investigation. So I don't know. It was just a really bad situation when you have one of the candidates under multiple criminal investigations. I mean, we still don't even know what happened with the Clinton Foundation investigations.
Well, and putting it back to the topic, this is, James Comey may be out there defending the FBI and calling them selfless and heroes, but if there's a crisis in the FBI, he's a big reason there is one.
Yeah.
He is a big contributory factor to the FBI's both polarization. That's the other thing. He says it should be above politics, and I don't want it to be politics. Remember, we talked about this before, the death of the FBI. Dude, you're doing a nationwide book tour crapping on the president. You think that wasn't going to be polarizing? Especially since this guy's elected and no one elected you to anything? Regardless of how you feel about Trump.
Yeah.
So if there's the crisis in the FBI is both internal morale and external perception, which of course are related. So they're in the midst of a political fight, and there's the country, the right wing now is really questioning the FBI.
Yeah, they're staunch supporters. They could always count on them to praise and defend them.
And now they can't. And so they have to run to the Democrats, but the Democrats are fickle friends. Just like the right are. I mean, that's the thing. The partisanship, which is good, by the way, because that's the other thing we should, I guess, cards on the table. I don't like the FBI. I don't think we should have the FBI. So the fact that it's having a internal and external crisis, or rather internal and external pressures on it it's not, I don't care. But I think if the FBI, is basing its current support on Democratic partisans, that could flip on a dime. And it has. It's not even a theory. It had. James Comey and the FBI were the worst thing ever since J. Edgar Hoover. I'd love to go back to the Twitter timeline and see all these people calling that J. Edgar Hoover wasn't this bad, James Comey, who are now all saying, James Comey is going to take down Trump, hero.
Hey, Jack Goldsmith compared him unfavorably to Hoover.
That's true.
Right? So it's not just people on Twitter.
That's true. But I'm just saying that the partisans, so the Republican support has evaporated for the FBI, which is a crisis in and of itself, because that's their traditional power base. Their traditional constituency is the reactionaries.
And they themselves,
Hoover on. So now they're trying to find liberal allies. And what I'm saying is those allies may be there today, but they'll be gone tomorrow.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think almost everybody in the FBI is a Republican, right? So there's a natural, they're going to bristle at it's their enemies, their political enemies, who are now defending them. So it's uncomfortable for a lot of reasons, but that partisan thing, they say it's not political.
Right. I mean, the FBI are the people who essentially are there to police progress. That's always been their mandate. They were created, and if you see, this is pretty good if you see the movie J. Edgar by Clint Eastwood starring Leonardo DiCaprio. It started in the opposition to the anarchists, how real or imagined the threat was, and from communism to civil rights, which was seemingly part of the struggle against communism under Hoover. And so it's a reactionary group. It's there or the anti-war movement. It's there to stop progress, or to at least mitigate it, to stop change. Forget progress, just change. They're there to preserve the status quo, which is why they're naturally Republicans. They're naturally conservatives, because they're trying to conserve. And so the reactionary right, has turned against them, and they're running to the liberals, but the liberals don't really have a natural affinity for the FBI.
No, I mean, part of their mission in life is to keep a check on the left, right?
Right, that's typically right. It's not a surprise. There's a lot of people bristling, to use your word, at this. So what the FBI seems to be trying to do with its public legitimacy crisis, the second part of the crisis, they're going to have to fix on their own, which is, I guess, just getting better agents and doing better casework. But on the external legitimacy issue, what Comey and other people are trying to do is reach out to the American people as a constituency using the media. And what I think they're totally underestimating is that that's not going to work. One, because the media you're using isn't well liked by a lot of people in the country, particularly the reactionary right. And two, the American people, for better or worse, are largely uninterested. Like, there's this petition about hitting the streets in the event Mueller is fired.
Yeah.
I don't think there's going to be massive protests. I think there's going to be a fair amount of protests. I think it'll look like the Women's March, which is a lot of people. But guess what? In this country of 350 million people, 330 million people, 500,000 people on the street across the country is really not that much.
Yeah, they're not going to knit hats.
And they were going to protest Trump no matter what he did. So there's not this great reservoir of support for the FBI that James Comey seems to think/hope there is.
Right. And Lichtblau talks about some numbers too, about their support. He says, indeed, public support for the FBI has plunged. A PBS NewsHour survey in April showed a 10-point drop from 71% to 61% in the prior 2 months among Americans who thought the FBI was, quote, just trying to do its job, unquote, and an 8-point jump from 23% to 31% among those who thought it was, quote, biased against the Trump administration. So this poll was sort of specialized, whereas going back to Mark Penn, and we can't cover everything he's been doing on this, but we could touch on a couple things. Back in December, he said, there's an article, an op-ed in The Hill where he's been publishing lately. Mueller, FBI face crisis in public confidence. So this is on December 14th, 2017. And he says 63% of polled voters believe that the FBI has been resisting providing information to Congress on the Clinton and Trump investigations. This is a remarkable finding for an agency whose new head said a few days ago that the agency was in fine shape. No, it isn't. 54% say Special Counsel Robert Mueller has conflicts of interest that prevent him from doing an unbiased job. Also, according to this month's Harvard CAPS Harris poll. So given this finding, the silence from the special counsel on the subject has become downright deafening. So these numbers sound a lot different. Lichtblau has the PBS NewsHour survey, and they're saying, a 10-point drop, but from 71% to 61%. So a lot of them still think, according to them, most people still think that they're just trying to do their job. They're not bad people. They're just, and only 31% think that the FBI is biased against the Trump administration.
I bet Comey is hurting that number.
Yeah, I agree.
I think Comey is actually taking that. I think he is taking that goodwill, which is, I think, knee-jerk and sort of semi-conscious, and by being so anti-Trump is actually going to take that number even further down. I wouldn't be surprised, because that's December 2017. I wouldn't be surprised if you did it an August poll, a few months from now, after this all settles in, it drops that number below 60 because of Comey. I think Comey is actually a counterproductive force for what he claims he wants to achieve.
Yeah, I agree with that strongly. And I mean, this is not, we can't compare these apples to apples, but we can kind of compare one of them. 54% say special counsel Robert Mueller has conflicts of interest that prevent him from doing an unbiased job. So that's in the Mark Penn poll. And in the PBS NewsHour poll that Lichtblau references, he says there's been an 8-point jump from 23% to 31% among those who thought that it was biased against the Trump administration. So it's not the same thing. Penn is equating Mueller with the FBI. Now, technically he's not. He's a special counsel appointed by the Department of Justice. But, what's Mueller best known for? Serving as the FBI director for 13 years.
That's how he got the appointment.
But I'm not quite sure that the country, well, clearly if these numbers can be trusted, they don't equate Mueller with the FBI. The PBS News survey is not talking about Mueller.
Well, but let's also remember when this IG report comes out, there's going to be congressional hearings.
Those numbers are not going to get better.
Yeah, those numbers are not going to get better. So in terms of crisis, the public external legitimacy crisis of the is only going to get worse with this IG report, which of course not only does it throw some dirt on Comey for his breaking protocols, but it could be the instrument that ultimately sees McCabe in a courtroom for misleading, which is to say lying to investigators about a public leak. Yeah. I mean, so this IG report could be a real further blow to the FBI. So if you think the FBI is in crisis now, let's see the fallout after this IG report comes out.
Well, the thing is, this IG report, it was supposed to come out. It's been done. My understanding is it's been done for a while now. And there were deadlines some months ago it was supposed to come out. But then they decided to release part of it, the part about McCabe, mainly about McCabe. But in that, I believe it was in that, and it was certainly reported, McCabe has been referred. So the Inspector General has said, prosecute this guy. We don't know whether they will, but that's what the Inspector General has recommended.
Okay, so here's from the article real quick. The Justice Department's Inspector General Michael Horowitz will soon release a much-anticipated assessment of Democratic and Republican charges that officials at the FBI interfered in the 2016 presidential campaign. That year-long probe, sources familiar with it tell Time magazine, is expected to come down particularly hard on former FBI Director James Comey, who is currently on a high-profile book tour. It will likely find that Comey breached Justice Department protocols in a July 5th, 2016 press conference when he criticized Hillary Clinton for using a private email server as Secretary of State. Even as he cleared her of any crimes, the sources say, the report is expected to also hit Comey for the way he reopened the email probe less than 2 weeks before the election, the sources say. The report closely follows an earlier one in April by Horowitz, the Inspector General, which showed that the ousted Deputy Director of the FBI, Andrew McCabe, had lied to the Bureau's Internal Investigations Branch to cover up a leak he orchestrated about Clinton's family foundation less than 2 weeks before the election. The case has since been referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, D.C. for potential prosecution. Another IG report in March found that the FBI retaliation against internal whistleblowers was continuing despite years of Bureau pledges to fix the problem. Last fall, Horowitz found that the FBI wasn't adequately investigating high-risk employees who failed polygraph tests. So the IG is... So there's a report coming up that's going to hit Comey. It's not all one report from what I'm reading here, Joanne, because this is saying there's an earlier report in April which showed that's the McCabe report. So this new report that's going to be coming out soon, doesn't say when, will soon release, is going to tag Comey. So, but it's going to lead to hearings. in which the McCabe is going to come up, as well as some of these other issues, it looks like. So, oh, God, they got Larry Nassar in there, too. Apparently, he was supposed to be investigated. The guy that molested all those gymnasts that just hit the news. I don't know if you saw that, Joanne, but this guy, this Olympics gymnastics doctor, Larry Nassar, do you hear about this?
Only tangentially. I read a little bit about
It's
here.
like,
one of the mothers was speaking out.
It's so many people. It's so many people. It's like it's dozens of girls who say he molested them, including some of the famous Olympians you'd recognize. So,
and the FBI knew it, and they withheld this information, or they didn't. What did they do?
Dropped the ball in the investigation.
Oh man!
They were supposed to investigate it. They didn't do anything, so the guy kept molesting girls in the year it took them to get on it.
And of course, that plays into the whole narrative, the QAnon and the Pizzagate stuff about it being.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. God, I didn't even think of that. Yeah, I'm sure it'll go into. Oh God, please don't let that get into my timeline.
Well, I mean, I have a nuanced view on that. I don't go for the QAnon or Pizzagate stuff, but
yes, because
I have no problem at all believing that there are widespread,
I'm sure, but
trafficking and
this is not a conspiracy. It's a conspiracy of incompetence, if you like, because they basically got the tip and then didn't do anything for like a year, and then finally investigated it. You know, I mean, like they just didn't take it seriously. It's like the Cruz thing. It's a Parkland shooting. It's
like Joe Paterno. It's like the Catholic Church.
Yeah, they just don't get it. They just don't follow up a lead. But they've got all this time to do these setups.
Well, not necessarily.
For terrorism cases.
You know, it could be powerful people have connections and they get things covered up. You know, I don't think it's at all unreasonable to think that kind of thing can happen.
It's possible. Well, I mean, but who did Nicholas Cruz? Who did he call? I mean, who had strings there? Who had juice?
Yeah, that's a different...
To tell the FBI not to...
No, I'm not saying it's about Nicholas. I'm talking about other cases of particularly, you know, child abuse and molestations and that went on for years with powerful people.
Well, that's a totally separate topic in the FBI, but something that's useful in remembering about the FBI is that, like a lot of institutions like the Supreme Court, which is now majority Catholic, but the FBI more so, now has like this Opus Dei stuff going on. And what's ironic about it is, for people who talk about FBI scandals, this guy, Robert Hansen, was the FBI in FBI counterintelligence, and he was a Russian agent. And there was a film made about him called Breach, which starred Cooper and that guy, Ryan Felipe. I don't know if you saw the film. But in any case, him and this is when Louis Freeh was the FBI director. And Hansen and Louis Freeh were both in Opus Dei. And they would meet. And all the time that Richard Hansen, was in Opus Dei, and he was working first for the communists, the Soviet Union, which is crazy if you're a real Opus Dei devotee, right? Because it's hardcore militant reactionary Catholicism, right? People who are upset about Vatican II and all these other things. And then he was working for the Russians. So you have the head of the FBI counterintelligence, who's a double agent, who's in Opus Dei and seeing the FBI director. So if you want to talk about Catholicism, you know, molestation and, you know, FBI dropping the ball, there's a lot of hardcore Catholics apparently in the upper echelons of the FBI. That's a whole nother show, I'm sure. But in any case, nobody ever talks about Hansen anymore. But that was a major scandal when it happened for those. This was in the early 2000s. Before it was pre 9/11, so I guess it got washed away.
I did see that movie. It was creepy as all heck.
Right, but Breach is the name of the film. But so the highest level of the FBI was double agent for the Russians. Oh, how deep does the scandal go? Perhaps this was all set in motion.
That's when actually Trump was involved in that. They've been recruiting him and grooming him since then.
They've been recruiting him. It was Opus Dei and Louis Freeh and the Illuminati. They all got together and decided that Trump should be president.
Didn't somebody some very serious person say that the Russians have been recruiting Trump since like the 1980s or something?
They believe. I
think some person, like, not a troll, some.
Oh, there's a bunch of books with this conspiracy theory in there, and it's garbage. They don't have it. It's the funny thing is they've investigated this thing over and over. It's like OJ looking for the real killer. It's like, I'm going to find him. It's like, no, that Hillary Clinton lost because she sucks.
Yeah, well,
you don't need it. You don't need the Russians for her to lose this election. If you're looking for, by the way, if you're looking for something that moved, like we talked about this, it's Comey. If you're looking for something that actually moved it. So, in any case, the FBI crisis is partly incompetence. Maybe they're failing in some cases because there's political stuff going on. I will grant you that. But the IG reports, when they come out, I think are going to do further damage. I think Comey is going to end his book tour, or maybe just be a bump, or maybe be like a break from the book tour to come testify. And he's going to have to explain all over again why he took those actions. I think that is going to, I think this damages the FBI. I really think when you look at those numbers, they're soft. What do you like? The FBI is this vague thing. Yeah, sure. It's like a great example of this is generic ballot. People say, would you vote for a Republican or a Democrat? And they give their answer. But then you look at there and it's like, okay, well, these are the two people actually running for Congress. It's a totally different poll. You know what I mean? Like, Comey is putting a face on the FBI. And he's going to be, interwoven with the FBI, just like McCabe. So for people who don't like Comey, which I think is easy to do because he's such a blowhard, I think he's going to take that number down. Because instead of people saying the FBI, how do you feel about the FBI? They're going to think, how do I feel about James Comey? Oh, that guy's a creep. That guy's up his own butt. Or that guy hates the guy I like. It's like, all these Trump supporters. So I think those numbers are soft. I think they could get a lot worse.
Right. And I think that, good for Lichtblau for getting into some of the sort of more root problems here. He goes into the specific cases, the big ones, well-known ones, where there's been a major failure by the FBI. Although I personally think he could have gone a lot further with that, but he says perhaps the easiest problems to address are the internal lapses. Experts say putting assets and management attention back to work on cyber, counterintelligence, and traditional crime after Mueller shifted them to counterterrorism would help. Quote, there's an overextension of the mission, says Brian Levin, professor of criminal justice at California State University, San Bernardino, which has worked with the FBI. Most of Horowitz's reports include measures the FBI can take to address their problems, including stricter rules for investigating polygraph test failures and training to protect whistleblowers. Because, the other thing that he talks about is retaliation against whistleblowers, which is apparently was happening a lot under Comey as well. But I guess he goes into a little bit more about what we talked about where, the mission, like FBI is in crisis, but they're also in crisis about like, wait a minute, who are we? What is our mission?
Oh, they're having an identity crisis.
Yeah. So I guess we already kind of touched on that, but I don't know why I brought that up. It was just a paragraph that I had seen here. I was trying to segue. What I don't think that Lichtblau covered well enough was the kinds of things that Mark Penn goes into. Like he talks about, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, there's sort of two big things going on here. There's the current crisis, the Comey, the McCabe, the election, the Trump criticism, and all that causing a crisis. But then there's these infrastructure, if you will, problems of the mission and the way the resources are allocated, what they focus on, and all that. But with part one, what Lichtblau didn't go into was the abuse of power. I don't think he went into that enough. And Mark Penn, and we'll follow up on this hopefully with another episode, he really goes into that.
Yeah, Lichtblau is not hitting them for bad action. He's kind of painting them as incompetence, good, kind of well-intentioned people making mistakes. He's not taking the position that I think is much more reasonable to take, which is that these people, a lot of these failures, quote unquote, were ambitious, agenda-driven power plays that failed.
And he goes further. He says that that's driven by the deep state. That the reason why, they're on this political mission, and I mean, I don't know how far you want to take it, but trying to...
Yeah, no. We're going to have to do a whole thing with Mark Penn, because Mark Penn, who's a former Clinton pollster and still associated with the Clintons, has been writing some stuff that is very intriguing. How about that for a word?
Yeah,
I would say intriguing from a Clinton.
I don't know why he's doing it, but some of it rings very true to me.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah. The Horowitz, the IG report, this article mentions that Comey's going to get dinged and the FBI is going to get dinged for influencing the 2016 election. That's a pretty big deal. That is a pretty big deal. I don't know I guess they'll come up with some new rules of what you can do and you can't do.
Maybe that's why they wanted to say Russia did it, because then it absolves them of their interference.
Yeah, well, that's...
Wasn't me, it was Russia.
The Clinton camp, right, too? I mean, they can't admit that they rigged the primaries and they screwed over half their party, and that's part of the reason why they lost. I mean, they all, ad nauseum, we've been through all of this with everybody, but yeah, it's almost like everybody who is culpable just is flinging it at the Russians, and that's the thing to do now. Oh man, what was that latest? There was another really good one where somebody blamed something on the Russians. I can't even remember.
Joanne Reed.
Joanne Reed blamed
her. MSNBC host blamed her homophobic posts on her own blog on hackers, presumably Russian hackers. But then she never said it wasn't true. She still says she doesn't believe she wrote them, but like everybody who's analyzed it thinks she claims basically that the Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine, was hacked too, and they said, "Nah, we haven't been hacked." So yeah, like it's the excuse for everything now. In fact,
it's even traveling across oceans or other countries doing
it's funny is that Kanye West, we'll end with this ridiculousness because we're way off topic, but Kanye West recently said some nice things about Trump, and then one of the Scott Dworkin, one of these fundraisers / Russiagate conspiracy theorists, said Kanye West has connections to Russia.
Yes, that was it. That was the latest one. Oh my God.
So I've
never seen such a one-size-fits-all.
We should just kind of be happy that a lot of these people are so incompetent, because I imagine the age of McCarthy, it wasn't this dumb. Like, they were able to be more professional with it, and Edward R. Murrow had to face him down and say, this isn't the America we believe in, truth. It's all about truth and justice. But with these guys, it's like so dumb and overplayed that you can't help but understand it's ridiculous. So I don't know. Maybe they're secretly, unwittingly doing God's work here. Showing people how dumb this is.
It strikes me almost every single day just how corrupt things have become, and just how much corruption breeds incompetence. Because, you don't...
It's also a grift. I mean, there's some of these Russiagate people on Twitter especially have like a grift. Like, they want money. Like, they got like a whole scam. Like Seth Abramson? Who's, not really a law professor. He says he's a law professor. He's gotten investigated as inflating his resume and claiming conspiracy theories. I mean, a lot of the people latching on to some of these conspiracy theories. Eric Garland. Remember Eric Garland? Time for some game theory. Louise Mensch, my favorite, who says that Trump's already been tried and found guilty.
I think she might be the one who said he was recruited in the 80s, actually.
Oh, was it her? No, but I mean, there were
others, though. Yeah.
it's hard to tell who's sincere, who's crazy. I guess if you're crazy, you're sincere, and then who's grifting.
Eichenwald.
Oh my God, he's done, right? He finally collapsed out of Twitter. Whatever. All right, we can't go through it. We got to do a whole show. We got to do a whole show on RussiaGate Incorporated.
Yeah, just an update, yeah.
Just an update, but we've talked about the FBI in crisis. We should probably return to this subject after the IG reports come out, and we'll see how much more damage it does, especially if Comey has to go testify before Congress again. And,
well, yeah, I think, this Inspector General report, everybody keeps talking on the news about, when the full report comes out, but nobody knows when it's coming out. But I did see in one of these clips that I was going through them saying that they believe that next week, this coming week, that would be, that Horowitz is going to testify. So I don't think it's just going to be he's going to drop this report, and people are going to, comb through it and report on it. I think it's coming with it's big enough that they're going to be congressional hearings. Now, where could that lead? Could we end up with sort of a set of Watergate type hearings or what? I don't know how big it's going to be. But this IG report is supposed to come out very soon.
So let's wait. We'll see what's going on there and get back to you then. That's our show. I want to thank you for listening. Please check us out aroundtheempire.com. See us on Patreon, patreon.com/aroundtheempire. Follow us on Twitter @aroundtheempire. Follow Joanne @JoanneLeon, LEON. Follow me on Twitter @US Empire Show. Questions, comments, want to yell at me? Dan @aroundtheempire.com. Thanks. See you next time.
And a special thanks to our patrons. We really appreciate you hanging in there with us. And thanks so much. Take care, everyone.